and then I'm going to put it on, YouTube, and then I'll give you guys the link, and then we'll put it on Facebook too. So we had a little bit of a chance to talk before we got on here and had our issues. We're all essential services with the Doug Ford government, and I just wanted to find out from both of you how things have changed in the last 10 days, 2 weeks as essential services in a COVID-19 pandemic. Who wants to go first?
I can start.
Okay.
Mark Habib speaking. As a lawyer.
I should have introduced you. I'm so sorry, Mark. Mark is like one of our major partners as far as legal lawyers goes that we do a lot of business with, and he's great. He looks after our clients really, really well. I even have his personal cell phone number. I'm not supposed to say that, but I do, in case we have something unusual that happens at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, which is really unusual to have that with a lawyer. So I feel he's our special lawyer, that he would be the only one that we would go to with questions that we have. And he's been a fantastic partner with our team. So that's Mark Habib. And then down below, the very tired one is, who's looking very stressed, would be our favorite mortgage broker, Jason Cleland, that we have an amazing relationship with as well. And the poor man, not only is he running his self-employed business at home, he also has 4 young children that are at home, and he's now a teacher on top of being a mortgage broker. And I've always said, I don't understand why you have 4 kids. I think that's totally nuts to begin with, but now with the job that you have, and I can tell you the guy works about 20 hours a day and then sleeps for about 4 hours, and you're probably not even doing that now because you have 4 kids at home. So it's, and Jason, phenomenal for us, and our clients absolutely love him, and we're the only realtor that he takes business from. So we have a really special relationship, and when we refer Jason, we know that everybody's gonna get great service. So I've got 2 of our favorite partners on the line here right now that we totally rely on and appreciate very much. So thanks. So now you can go ahead and tell us what's been going on the last 10 days, Mark. Sorry about that.
Thank you for your kind words, Lorie. It's always great to work with you and see you and your team in action. This COVID-19 has radically altered the way we do business. I could quickly tell you about 3 basic areas that it's really impacted us. First and foremost, it's impacted us greatly internally in our office, because my office, we have 3 law clerks and 2 lawyers. So it's a small office, but we're in a confined space. And so, of course, trying to work on files, of course, is challenging. So we've had to modify our work environment. We've had to lock our front door with signage outside, letting people know that they have to knock on the door, and, you know, documents would be passed through the crack in the door, and that type of thing. It's a challenge because, you know, with couriers coming and going, and clients walking in periodically. So that's number 1 internally. Number 2, of course, dealing with our clients is a challenge, because when it comes time to close a transaction, we want to meet with them, and we need to meet with them for a couple of reasons. One, we're required to do so by the banks if they're getting a mortgage, and by our law society, because we have anti-fraud measures, and we need to verify who our clients are. We need to get their ID. They have to provide 2 pieces of valid ID, one of which has to be a photo ID. And we have to meet with them and look at the ID and say, yep, that's you, in order to ensure that anti-fraud measures are in place. We also want to meet with the clients so we can go through the documents with them that we're reviewing, and explain any things that they need explaining. Doing things remotely, we still can do those things with clients. When it comes to document signing, we email the documents to the client. We go on to Zoom or some other online platform where we ask them to wait to sign the documents, that they're to print them off. We go on the Zoom meeting, and then we walk them through the documents. and they show me, they hold up the paper so I can see their signature. And then they would bring back the documents, have them dropped off here where I can actually put inked paper and be the witness. And some of the documents that the clients have to sign, of course, are sworn affidavits or statutory declarations, same thing. And in our business, when you swear an affidavit, the person is supposed to be in your presence or before us. And that's a legal question and based on a law. And that's had to be modified very recently so that we can swear affidavits remotely using the Zoom or some other platform like that. So that has its challenges. On the other hand, it's a big advancement because historically we weren't allowed to do this. So although there's a lot of negative coming to our practice because of the virus, it's also forcing a lot of issues forward that we've been lobbying for years to make our business a little bit more modern and in line with the new, the online world that we deal with and we see more and more in our businesses. The challenges, of course, in sending documents to clients, not everybody has a printer, not everybody has a camera on their computer. Not everybody has legal size paper because for whatever reason, lawyers still use legal size paper a lot, as do certain banking institutions. And so that's a challenge. And so in those instances where we're not able to do that, we have other arrangements. We arrange for the client to show up at our office in our parking lot. We're lucky. We have just open my door and there's a big parking lot right there. So we will present the documents to them while they're sitting in their car, standing 2 feet away, with or without gloves on.
7 feet.
And I'll stand back 2 feet and witness the documents while they're signing them in their car. It's great on a nice sunny day like today, but last week when it was pouring rain, it wasn't so much fun.
Yeah. Do you think that it's going to go back, Mark, to the way that it was, or do you think you're going to be able to continue using like Zoom and doing things remotely like this?
Well, I think it's going to continue for the next little while, and it's like anything. We call it, a slippery slope. Once you start down a path, it's hard to climb. It's hard to go back. And these are a lot of changes that we've been pushing our law society for. Some of the banks as well are very traditional in what they expect. And last week there was a bit of a crisis and a disconnect because for example, on a home purchase, the instructions that we had received from the bank indicated in those instructions that we were to meet with the clients, meet physically with the clients. And so, there's been a lot of effort and lobbying at the federal, both provincial and federal level by our organizations and with other institutions to try to get the banks to quickly modify that to get in line with some of the proposals that even our law society finally implemented to allow us to relax these rules. But it caused a lot of consternation. There was a lot of panic in my industry. There's a new Facebook page that popped up called COVID-19 Real Estate Lawyers. It's a province-wide Facebook page, and everybody's on there with their problems and trying to help each other walk through some of this stuff. I'm also sit on the county of Ottawa Carleton Real Estate Lawyers Committee, and so we're communicating back and forth constantly and trying to deal with these issues. The other issue that I just want to briefly touch on, and maybe I'm sure Jason will want to get in on it, is the movement of money. The movement of money is very, very challenging. It always has been for lawyers. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but historically, what lawyers do on a purchase transaction is I would have to I should get bank drafts. If the seller has a mortgage on their home, the only way for me to make sure that that mortgage is paid off and removed from the title is for me to write a check directly to that financial institution and send that to the seller's lawyer, who provides me with a statement showing what's owing. So we cut 2 checks, one to that bank and the rest of the money going to that lawyer. And this is a requirement of our law society to ensure that we don't just give the money to the other lawyer who might, abscond. And, as we all know, periodically lawyers do bad things, and we want to minimize that. And so we have best practices, and that's a best practice to ensure that the buyer is only going to have one mortgage on their property, and that's the one that they took out. With my bank, for instance, Bank of Montreal contacted us last week and says, we don't want you coming to the branch asking for bank drafts anymore, because we've slimmed down our staff. It's COVID-19. It's, the less people in the branch, the better. We've reduced our hours. We want you to wire money to the other lawyer. And this is in direct contradiction of our of the Law Society's recommended procedures to close a real estate deal. So we've had to, deal with that issue. The other issue we've had is when you wire money, it's not necessarily in real time. A lot of times it is, but I had 2 closings last week where it took 3 days for the wire to go through. And trying to deal with both my bank and the other bank was impossible. There was nobody to really communicate with. It was a help desk, but everything was remotely done. And we never really got it finally went through after an investigation, but we never really got an answer why. Never got an apology, and my client, who was in a hotel for 3 days, didn't really get any compensation for that. So these are the kinds of challenges we're having. And one last one before I move on. We had a couple of clients who are buying and selling homes within a very short period of time. We had a client who's buying and he was selling 2 days before his purchase, and we were advised by the people buying his home that because they lost their job, they were not able to get their mortgage financing, and as a result, they couldn't close. And our client needed the funds from that transaction to complete their home purchase. So what does that do? Well, that gets us, having to get on the phones with or without the real estate agent sometimes to try to negotiate extensions, to try to negotiate terminations of the agreement and the return of deposit money. It's really stressful to deal with, and of course very stressful for the clients, when they're making such a big arrangement as buying and selling a home. I can tell you that locally in Ottawa, our real estate bar is very cordial. It has been for many years, unlike it is in some other jurisdictions south of us. And so when we've been talking about this, we've encouraged everybody to keep an open mind and to be reasonable in dealing with requests for extension, because number one, it's a crisis and everybody needs to kind of get along and work this through. But two, that what goes around comes around, and that's often the way we look at it is, taking a hard line this time for your client may not bode so well for you next time when you're on the other end asking the same lawyer for a favor. So nonetheless, that's challenging, because as a lawyer, your responsibility is to represent your client's interests, and sometimes your clients they want the hard line and they want their rights protected, and you're forced to take a position perhaps that you might personally not want to take. But that's our obligation to our clients, is to represent them but also advise them and counsel them, as how they should perhaps be looking at this.
Mm-hmm. And you, Jason, how have things changed for you?
The biggest change that I've found is the keeping up with the times, as far as adapting with the lenders. I'm finding a lot of them change their structures and their policies due to this. And the biggest one that I've found in the last 2 weeks is the income confirmation. How people are losing their jobs or being laid off, and how it's affecting the approval that's in place. So with that said, the job confirmations, they have up to a week before closing to confirm that job status. And if the job is not in place as originally intended, then they are pulling out as far as the financing.
Really?
So yeah, now in the last 24 hours, the banks have been reaching out to me and stating that they're going to be changing their policies with a letter from the employer stating that they are guaranteed return to work after the COVID-19 elapses. So that's good news. But to touch on what Mark had said originally, having the clauses for the COVID-19 within the real estate documents does help, because it gives the client an alternative and to extend the closing dates. So that's a big thing that I'd like to point out. The second one is deferrals. There's a lot of people looking for answers on deferrals just due to the crisis, not being able to make their mortgage payments. So not lender specific, because I do deal with many lenders, but all of them do have something in place, which I will issue on this broadcast or afterwards a number to contact each one of them, as well as they can contact me if they have any direct questions.
But I think that based on what Mr. Trudeau said, the perception was that you just had to call and you could get a deferral on your mortgage. But I don't believe that that's the case. Can you comment on that?
Yes, it is case by case. There are a lot of people currently trying to get deferrals on mortgages, which they are receiving, whether it's unemployment insurance. So they are looking at it case by case. It's more in dire need, where the people cannot afford the mortgage payment. So my suggestion is that if you do have the ability to make the mortgage payment, maintain the mortgage payment, because it's meant for people in risky situations.
But I think if it's somebody who's in dire circumstances, they're at their last couple $1,000s, and seems to me it's a little bit too late for that. But anyway, it's just my comment on the whole thing. I find that the majority of the policies and the subsidies and everything that are coming out are challenging. They just came out with a report saying that 37% of small business owners said the subsidies don't apply to them. And so it's great that there's handouts and it sounds really good, but I think there's a lot of people that are falling through the cracks too. But these clauses that you're talking about, Mark and Jason, that's something that we started putting into our offers in the last 10 days or so ago. Do you have any comments on that, or finding that a challenge? If it's in the agreement or it's not in the agreement, is it better if it's in the agreement?
Well, it's certainly preferable from the buyer's standpoint to have that clause in the agreement, so that if for some reason they lose their job and the bank pulls their financing, that they have an out. From the seller's standpoint, that's a bit more challenging. They may have bought another house. They may need the funds from that sale. And they've, once the usual conditions have been fulfilled, they like to know that it's a done deal, and they can go to the bank on that assurance that the deal's going to close, or that at least the buyer's committed to closing. But if the buyer always has an out right up to the last minute, given the current situation, that's problematic. And I would, I'd caution all realtors who are acting for sellers to be mindful of their duty and obligation to represent their sellers' interest. And I'm not sure that having them sign an agreement with that clause is acting in their best interest. It's really problematic. Now, having said that, there is another legal principle. You may have heard it before. It's called force majeure. Force majeure is a legal principle that states that a party is relieved from their obligations to perform a contract because of circumstances beyond their control, and one which they neither party had envisioned would happen at the time they negotiated the contract. So force majeure might be applicable in some deals that were signed back in January or December that are now closing. I'm not sure that in the absence of an actual clause in an agreement that somebody could rely on a force majeure clause, because now it is anticipated that given the virus, there are issues that might impact the closing. I just sent an email to a colleague of mine who is involved with committee that makes the drafts, with OREA, that drafts the OREA standard clauses, asking if that's something that they're going to look at including in the standard agreements, because to the extent that we can reach an agreement up front in terms of what these clauses should look like, rather than have a whole hodgepodge of them, and trying to ensure that buyers and sellers are both kind of protected. And the reason I mention that is we had a deal where the buyer's lawyer said they wanted to terminate the deal because of the COVID-19 virus. They didn't really give much of an explanation. We asked them to commit in writing an explanation and swear an affidavit about the circumstances surrounding why they couldn't close the deal. The lawyer said, "I'm going to call you." He didn't want to even put it in writing. So, you can see how these clauses, you might get into some issues where somebody is relying on that clause to get out of a deal. What's the, how truthful are they? Maybe they just had a change of heart. And the other thing, of course, that we're having, and maybe you've seen it too, Lorie, I know, we've had clients who are entitled to do a final walkthrough of a home. We had buyers who wanted to exercise that right, but were afraid to go into the home. We had a deal last week where one of the occupants of the home who was selling actually had the virus. So how, and the people buying the home, we're now going to be buying a house that had somebody living in the home who had the virus, and they were, of course, afraid to close and move into the house. So, nobody ever thought of any of these types of scenarios ever unfolding. So it's really, it's challenged all of us to think of new ways of getting deals done and coping with situations where they may not get done.
I find every day, every situation, every conversation, every decision is different. It is really stressful, right? Because you want to do the right thing by everybody. We had we've found that there's been a fair amount of buyers that are purchasing, because there's still a pent-up demand for purchasing homes, and there's a lack of inventory in the market here, that they are buying virtually. Either with a virtual tour and the photos, or with the FaceTime walkthrough, either by, the seller or by the selling agent or the listing agent. So that seems to be happening. Have you noticed that, Jason, that there's properties getting purchased virtually?
Yes. I find the whole virtual aspect, the electronic aspect, into fruition now more than ever. Getting back to what we were talking about, the electronic document, all the electronic format is all becoming very part of my everyday business now. In regards to the virtual, I've seen it probably about 10 times within the last 2 weeks in regards to virtual sales. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I see it becoming more and more.
It's interesting, because we all commented before we got on this that March was like an incredibly busy month. And when I looked at the real estate stats, there didn't even, the first week, second week, third week, fourth week, they went up or down by about 100, but really in the end, they averaged out to about the same. Like, there wasn't a huge drop in volume or anything like that in March. And I don't think that we've actually seen as much of the impact of the virus yet. What do you think? I think it's something that, April and May is when we're going to start to see a huge difference.
Well, in the new home business, new home construction, of course, Ford has announced that any homes that are in the pipeline and scheduled to close in the next 60 days will be allowed to proceed, but otherwise, all work on those homes has to stop as being non-essential. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see, certainly come the summertime, a big lag of new home sale closings, as things get pushed back.
Which might mean a lack of new listings too, right? If it's somebody who's moving up, which we already have, an issue with having listings. So so I could see that happening. And I've had clients say that they're...
I meant to ask you, Lorie, so before I forgot, how are you dealing with home inspections virtually? Are they being, well, in this market, I guess a lot of people don't even do them when they're competing, but if somebody wanted to do an inspection, are inspectors able to do them?
Yeah, they are. So yes, some people are. What we've tried to do is get pre-home inspections done and have the home inspector go in by himself. And you know, and they're wearing gloves and they're really respectful. And then we have a home inspection available online for anybody who's interested in purchasing. And I think that that eliminates a lot of extra showings. We just had that happen on a listing where an agent wanted to do a pre-home inspection before offer date. And I said to Martin, I said, you know, Martin, if we have more than one person wanting that, I said, we're going to have more people in the house. So we decided that we would get the home inspection done and share it with everybody because we felt it was better for the seller. And it'd be better in a, you know, an offer presentation date as well. So we paid for that because we just preferred just have one home inspector go in. But you know, Michael's got a home inspection booked for this Friday, and what we and many others have done is get permission from the seller that it'll just be the home inspector in there, and then we go and we open up the door and stand back, and the home inspector goes in and does this thing, and we stay. And then when it's finished, we lock up. And, you know, a lot of the home inspectors now have things virtually, like they send you the report by email and they have the photos. So, because the less people in the house, the better. And Rico's been really clear that, you know, we're an essential service, but we need to try and do as much as possible virtually. But like you with the parking lot, you know, there are some things that we just can't do them virtually, and we still have to get through it. So we've been following health and safety procedures that have been recommended, and we're really careful. I mean, I think anybody, when you go outside right now, you feel a little bit stressed out as it is, right? Like you'd prefer not to. So, you know, it's all been kept to a minimum. But I think one person in the house using hand sanitizer before, you know, they get in, once they get in, touching, I mean, the home inspector's touching more things than a buyer would. Because if you do go into a house, usually the seller has all the lights on, they have all the doors open, you know, and the buyer's keeping their hands in their pockets and not touching anything. But a home inspector is, you know, obviously touching things. So hand sanitizer and, you know, gloves have definitely been used. And yeah, so I think a pre-home inspection would be a really good idea. And so, yeah, we're just trying to do our best. But, you know, I mean, one of the things that I think is more of a, not more of a concern, but one of the things that is a big concern is any houses with tenants. You know, I know, Jason, you own a few income properties as well. And, you know, we've sold a few properties where there's been tenants in them too. And, you know, we have to take their concerns a lot more relevant. You know, we have to really consider them in this. And we've actually, you know, in some cases told clients it might be better to wait, you know, to sell because you have a tenant. So it's just every situation seems to be, you know, require a different decision. That's what I find.
Well, one thing that I'm running into that's very close to the inspection is the appraisals. They are also doing what's called a virtual appraisal now, where they do a drive-by property, and then they have a Skype or a Zoom meeting with the clients to see what the condition of the property side. As well as certain lenders are doing automated appraisals where they just use the comparables in the last 30 to 60 days to find out if the valuation is appropriate. So yeah, that's one challenge again that I face on my end, is because most lenders are looking for appraisal now. So
yeah, so it seems like every single service, you know, has had to adapt. We, you know, we like to have our homes staged before we list them too. And, you know, we feel that it's an advantage to the seller that their home, particularly now, if you're going to try and sell a house virtually, you know, it needs to look fantastic online. And, you know, so how do you get staging done? How do you, you know, advise clients on staging? I mean, you know, stagers, some of them are doing the FaceTime walkthrough and advising, you know, clients on things that they can do. So it doesn't matter what you think about or what you touch, it requires some real thought to be respectful, you know, and still, because, you know, for us, there's still people that need to sell. You know, if they've already bought, they need to sell, or if they're moving out of town, you know, and they've been relocated, they need to sell. There's lots of different reasons. You know, it could be that there was a death in the family, or you know, apparently, you know, abusive situations are worse right now because everybody's, you know, at home, and you know, so there's situations that are just not conceivable that you can wait, you know, to buy or to sell, and you need to do that. So yeah, I love problem solving. So I must say that if you love problem solving, it's certainly the environment to be in, wouldn't you say? Oh my God. Oh. And what about rates? I got it. You know, Jason, I think the biggest question and comment on Facebook has got to be, why is it the Bank of Canada keeps lowering their rates and yet mortgage rates are going up?
Yes. So I get that every day. The Bank of Canada rates, how they reflect what's happening in the market today, is the Bank of Canada rates are for lenders specifically. They do the primary lending rate. So they're currently at 0.25%. They've dropped almost 2% from the start of this virus till now. Now, what it's for them dropping the rates is to support the economy and the financial systems. So the small business, anybody on a variable rate would see the direct reflection, because as the rates are dropping, the bank of the actual lender specific, they're dropping their prime rate as well. However, the fixed mortgages, this is the question that I get often, the fixed mortgages, not staying the same, are rising. And the reason that they're rising is because the banks are forecasting of default. So they're putting this in place to eliminate the default for new clients coming on, as well as to compensate default. And that's the best explanation. Now, the big six banks are doing this. Now, I do have other lenders, the monoline lenders, that aren't doing there's like a couple of rates on roll today. I can get a 2.1% variable, and on a fixed, I can get a 2.9. Now, if you were to look at this on the big banks side, they're closer up to the 2.89 and over 3%. It really depends on what product and what the situation is. So I have certain clients today that are looking, you know, to pull equity and to tap into this market to use it as leverage. Where I have some people just wanted to just refinance and get the lower rate to lower their monthly obligation. So every case is different. However, the rates are still low as of today. It's just some of the bigger banks are forecasting, the bigger the portfolio, the higher the rates I find. So that's my best explanation for it. But again, the Bank of Canada is dropping the rates just to offset the economy crisis. So the small businesses are getting helped out in this time of need. It's not really meant for the residential sector of mortgages.
So it's obviously a good time to have a variable rate.
Yes.
Yes.
And a home equity line of credit, those products, they are directly reflected. Anything that's secured to the property. Now, I have been told, again, this is sort of out of my realm, as far as credit cards, I have been told cards are going to see a drop as well, just to offset.
Yeah, they did announce that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what else do we need to share with everybody? Because we're not getting any questions, and I want to make sure that we cover off things from your end for sure. How long do you think we're going to be in this for?
I'm thinking September myself.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. August, best scenario would be August, I think. I mean, I don't see this virus just going away. I mean, all we're doing is, delaying the onset of what is sure to happen. So the more we flatten, we're just extending the period of exposure, unless miraculously it just goes away with the summer months, which
Mhm.
which it might. We don't know. Other flus seem to go away when the warm weather comes. This one, I'm not so sure it will.
Do you find that you're getting a lot of like new applications for financing for mortgages, or is it more refinancing? I'm just kind of curious to think, like, where's the activity going to be over the next couple of months? Is it new buyers, or is it going to be, that's just going to completely flatten out? Because Ottawa's
I
been
would
so different, I think, than some areas.
I find a lot of my businesses come anybody that's got a pre-approval, they're really trying to push and act on it. In regards to the refinance, I have really switched my business motive right now to client care. So I'm trying to reach out to all my clientele to let them know what's available, what's not available, the deferral processes, and to make sure that they're okay. In that case, I am finding a lot of refinances. Just people want to take advantage of the rates. Also, they want to pull out some of the equity to do whichever at the time of the great rates at the moment. So refinance has got to be top on the list, and then it's people purchasing that have pre-approvals already in place.
I'm seeing a big uptick in the number of people refinancing their homes currently, likely for the reasons you've stated as well.
That's true, eh? Because you have to get all the refinance paperwork signed as well. So, what about tenants, like landlords that have tenants and the tenants aren't paying their rent? I kind of notice on Facebook that some of them can pay their rent, but they feel that they don't need to pay their rent. The Law Society must have some sort of guidance on that as well, Mark.
We haven't seen much of that. Certainly, there are tenants who are going to take advantage of the fact that no evictions are allowed to take place during this period. I think that people can still commence an application before the tribunal, filing the required paperwork, but I don't believe that any orders will be issued authorizing an eviction. I had a situation last week where we closed on a purchase. My client, because the seller wouldn't evict the tenant, my client who bought the property wanted to take possession. We issued the notice to terminate for personal use because the buyer wanted to live in the property, give the required 60 days notice, because her mother her mother was elderly and she needed to have her mom in there, so she was moving into a property that was suited for that. And we got some pushback from the tenants, stating that they didn't have to and they weren't going to cooperate. And so I think, it's going to be a case by case basis, and some people are going to pay, some people are not, some people are going to leave, some people are not. So I think your point is well taken, that maybe it's not the best time to buy a rental property in this environment, if that's a concern that your tenants are going to be paying the rent.
Yeah, although it's a great time to buy a rental, like a property with a tenant in it, if you are an investor, because you already have a tenant, is I think it's hard to find a tenant right now, for something that's vacant. That's what we've certainly noticed. You made me think of something though. I would think that if you have a buyer that's purchased something with a tenant, you've asked for vacant possession, and then the whole COVID-19 thing, like that is a challenge, right? Like
Yes.
a vacant property would be a better option than a property where you think the tenant's going to move out because they can't find anywhere to live. So this is a perfect reason for them to say sorry, like there's nowhere to go and they're going to get away with it. Wow.
Of course, we're seeing situations where a property is being sold. The tenant is supposed to be assumed, but the tenant hasn't paid the rent for the last 2 months. So now between the buyer and the seller, we have to sort that how that's all going to play out. on closing, right? With holdback of money and who's going to collect the rent from that tenant, who's going to absorb the loss, and it's just so many different additional issues to deal with now than I thought we had a lot to think about before. But now we have a lot more to think about.
Oh my God, you're making my head spin, Mark. As if it wasn't spinning already. It's true. Like that's what I'm seeing. That's what you're seeing. Like we're all seeing all these completely, maybe 1 out of 25 times you might have a situation that's a little more complicated, but it almost seems like 25 out of 25 is a little bit more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
somebody just got approved for their mortgage. They just firmed up on their financing, right, Jason? And then
Yes.
they get a slip that they're laid off like right after. You can imagine the amount of the stress. I'm actually, I really love buyers right now that have jobs where they get to work at home and they work for the government. I think you should be out there, right? You should be out there buying a house because you are like an A+ client for the agent and for the seller and for the financing guy and for the lawyer. It's like, oh, this is easy. Give me an easy one. Yeah. No, it's.
Yeah. I ran into four clients last week with that same situation. They just signed off their conditions, and then they found out 3 days later that they were laid off due to the COVID. And I have 2 other files where it's construction, and they basically been told that they cannot proceed with construction due to minor variance not in place. And so these are other challenges with the construction side, new builds. If they're within 60 days, they're fine to move in if they're over 60% complete. But anything over 60 days is now becoming a challenge. So almost like a snowball effect with a small issue turning into a major issue. Mm. So the biggest thing is to adapt. And I'm seeing it on the lender's perspective that they are adapting. They are having common sense point of views of it, so that they are looking at every situation differently, which is good. Mm-hmm. Gives me a lot of hope.
And as small business owners, because that's what you are, we're the backbone of the country, right? Small business owners. How do you feel about getting through September and what the federal government is proposing and offering? Are you getting comments on that from other small business owners? Like, does it seem to be something that fits the bill for most people, or is it?
Depending on the business, like I know a few people in the restaurant business that they don't know what's going to happen. They've got employees, they've got leases to deal with. They are getting helped out by the government, and that's where this Bank of Canada rate drop does come into play. But again, it's time. We don't know what timeline we're working with, and it really is. It's up in the air. They're doing it month by month.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the government's issued that $40,000 emergency loan to help small businesses meet their overhead expenses. There's some advantage. There's some benefit of taking advantage of it, because if you can pay back 30 of the 40,000 within 2 years, you don't have to pay that extra 10. And if you can't pay the 40, you get another 2 years to spread that over at a 5% interest rate. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but how much is $40,000 going to get you through this? And that's my concern. Is that we may just be buying a month or 2, and for some people that 40,000 goes a long way. For other businesses, it's a drop in the bucket. It's so hard to gauge right now who's going to take advantage of that and whether that's going to be sufficient.
Well, and when do you take advantage of it, right? Like, if I think the fact that we don't really know how long this is going to go on, if we did, you could make some better decisions, I think. But, maybe that you don't need the 40,000 now, but maybe in July or August, you're going to be like, if this is going to go on any longer, I need to. But if you took it out too soon, thinking that you were taking advantage and it was a great option at the time, and you did it too soon because it went on too long, it could be really detrimental. Yeah, it's very challenging time, but we're all in it together, right?
Yeah.
And we're all working from home and staying safe. Not necessarily sane if you have 4 kids at home and you're trying to do your job. No.
I'm sure both of you feel blessed in the sense that we have jobs, that we are able to work and continue to generate an income. We do have we have serious obligations to our clients, and so you take the good with the bad, right? And coming to work and not knowing if you're exposing yourself unnecessarily or others. You try to limit the your net, keep it as close as possible. But we don't know if we're passing paper, sending a courier with to a paper to another office that arrives within an hour by courier.
Mm.
What is the potential exposure of transferring paper with a virus on it?
Yeah.
How many of us are actually sitting in our homes working with gloves on? I doubt very many. So, and then trying to even find gloves or find wipes.
Yeah, or sanitizer. Forget it. It's just terrible.
So. As I said, I feel blessed that I still have a job and that I'm able to continue to employ my staff. I don't know if this continues for any length of time, come June, July, if we see a drop in the market, whether we'll be able to continue to do that. So all we can do is hope and pray that we get a handle on this, and sooner the better.
Yeah, which means we need to stay home as much as we can, right? Which we do. But I remember the day that Doug Ford announced that they were closing down non-essential businesses. You and I were communicating on Facebook, and I was like, what is a non-essential and an essential business, and you were concerned and I was concerned. And then, it came out like late that night, which I wish he would have had that out earlier, but the stress of thinking, oh my God, if I'm on the non-essential list, what does that really mean? And I do feel that, we're really fortunate and that we still have a job. And even if I end up on the non-essential list, you two have to stay on the essential list, because I have, people that have bought homes that need to close on them, right? In, April, May, June, and July. And, things could change, right? At any point where we're not considered as essential, although I think we are, but nonetheless, I feel pretty grateful that I was on the list for sure, because it would have been pretty dire, like right away. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from all of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to see big changes in the way people conduct business. We're going to see different platforms for doing business. I think we were already starting to see that in our economies. More and more people buying goods and services online as opposed to going to a store. We're seeing big businesses close. The big box stores are closing. Can't compete. High rents that have to be paid. So we're going to see, I think, a big transformation in our economies. Not just from this COVID, but it's been pending. It's been coming for a while now, and you wonder if all these large commercial buildings are going to be sitting vacant now because people can do all this work from home. What is that going to do to the commercial real estate market? What does that do to rents? How does that impact the economy? On a larger scale. So these are all going to be interesting things to follow.
Well, I've never been one that felt that I could work from home. So I've always had like an office, which you pay rent for, right? I mean, as a small business. And I'm working from home. I can't say this is my dining room table, actually, that I'm spread out on, because my dad has the home office. And, but nonetheless, it makes you sort of evaluate, do you really need to pay a few $1,000s a month for rent. And, you know, so those small things, I think that there'll be, you're right, like commercially and anyone who has an office, you know, can I just go virtual and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it could make a lot of changes. We're all having to look at that. And I think too that, you know, what they say about having a 3-month emergency fund, right? Like whoever would have thought something like this would ever happen. So I would imagine that discretionary spending, you know, for people, like having an emergency fund will probably be much more important to them for sure. And we've been a very
emergency wine supply.
Oh my God, I went out and bought a case of wine. I did. I was like, Michael called me and he's like, Mom, he said, we can't be out at all, you know, and he was like totally panicked. And I was at the liquor store to get a glass or get a bottle and I ended up with a case. I said, it's my last time I come out, I'm getting a case of it. Oh my God, it's so bad. But oh, the stories we will have to tell from all of that. But listen, I don't want to keep you because I know that you're both really busy. Is there anything else you want to share? We're going to share this online with everybody. I've really appreciated your time, and both of you are such wonderful partners of ours and of mine. And I'm just so grateful that I have the relationship that I do with both of you, that I could actually ask you to spend an hour with me and just discuss all of this and our changes in our lives and changes in our clients' lives and our families' lives. It's just not even fathomable.
No.
So,
and I just wanted to say thank you for putting this on, Lorie. It's a very big part of my business to get the word out to all the clients. So that's a big thank you there. Thanks for your time, Mark. Everybody stay safe. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me. I'm sure my number will be somewhere listed on this, but you can reach me anytime.
Well, yeah.
Yes, Lorie, thank you so much. Thank you so much as well, Lorie, for putting this on. It's been great, very interesting. Jason, pleasure chatting with you. And just for my clients or other clients, I'm not, we're in and out of our offices, so we're encouraging people to email us if they need to get a hold of us more than by phone call, because my staff are not here to answer their phone and call forwarding doesn't seem to be working. So email, please. Yes.
Well, and both of all your contact information is on our website too. You know, you are recommended relationships that we have. So both emails and phone numbers are there. And for sure, if somebody has specific questions, all three of us are available. It's just a time to add value, right? And answer questions and let everybody know that your world is upside down as much as our world is upside down, and we're all in it together. And that's all we can do. So thank you. It was so amazing to see your beautiful faces, you know, when you're in isolation. I mean, this is just awesome. Jason, get some rest, like seriously. Thank you, everybody, so much. Take care and stay safe.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.